Dr. Frederick H. Lovejoy, Jr. is Associate Physician and Chief of Boston Children's Hospital. He is the William Barenberg Distinguished Professor of Pediatrics, Harvard Medical School. His books include The Transformation of Pediatrics, which is a history of Boston Children's Hospital, and Charles A. Janaway, Pediatrician to the World's Children. He grew up in Concord, Massachusetts, attended St. Paul's School and Yale before receiving his medical degree at the University of Virginia. I'm yelling because I don't have a mic. The Lovejoys came to Annisquam in 1937, following the recommendation of four great friends: Brooks Stevens, Windsor Gale, Alden French, and John Teal. All familiar names because their families still live here. They lived in a house on Adams Hill Road overlooking the old Wharf Courts, where Fred and Jill later spent their summers with their kids, Phoebe, Ted, and Charlie, and live today. Dr. Charles A. Janaway, who is Physician-in-Chief of Boston Children's Hospital, lived next door. I believe the story Fred will tell us tonight begins there. I didn't really know Freddie Lovejoy until he befriended my father in his later days when he and Jill were so kind to him and Jackie. But I have been observing him and his bow ties since I was a little boy. He was part of a remarkable group, the oldest born to my parents' generation just before World War II. They seemed especially elegant to those of us who followed behind them. We all looked up to them. Most remarkably, they are all still friends after a lifetime here. You might see them any night sitting together at the yacht club, and I see some of you here, Ellen, and Bill Friend, I know you're out there somewhere, and Ellen Royce, and others included Jill Carter and George Betair. I'm sure I've missed some. But Fred had a special fascination for me because he looked so much like the great silent film comedian Harold Lloyd. I realize this says more about me than it does about Fred, a youthful misapprehension perhaps in a summer world made up at least partly of dreams. Annisquam has always been a beehive of distinctive personalities, and in those days it was almost an Algonquin round table of old Yankees. In our amateur nights and theatrical productions, yacht club events and Saturday night dances, sailboat races and tennis games, those characters loomed large. So here's Fred. And here's Harold Lloyd. Can you see it? Very, very distinguished. Fred's a serious man who has done serious things, but Harold Lloyd's comic persona was propelled by a special kind of positiveness and high energy that reminded me of Fred. I don't think I've ever known anybody as positive as Fred Lovejoy, and with that, it is my honor to introduce him.
Petey, that was wonderful. Wonderful, thank you. I want to thank you for this thoughtful and really wonderfully generous introduction. I believe somewhere up there, Paul Littlefield is looking down and saying, "Good job, son. I'm proud of you." As is Jackie, who is in this audience. Thank you, Petey. I remember it as if it was yesterday. It was the most divisive of times. The bright lights of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy and the brief shining moment that was Camelot were fading into the past. The giants of that era, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Robert McNamara, and the Bundys, had fallen to the most polarizing and unwinnable of wars. And the country was still to face the tumultuous challenges of the civil rights movement, as well as the Saturday Night Massacre, the very great integrity of Archibald Cox, and Watergate. I turned over my responsibilities as the president of the House Staff Association at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. Signed out my patients at midnight, climbed into my car, and drove overnight to Boston and the Children's Hospital. Quickly shaved and reported to Dr. Janeway's office at 7:30 sharp. It was July 1st, 1969, and a new beginning. Dr. Janeway's secretary said to me he would take me to Dr. Natus' office, the father of pediatric cardiology in the United States. My first rotation. "Good morning, Alex," said Dr. Janeway, breezily but warmly. "Good morning, Dr. Janeway," said Dr. Natus as he stood and bowed. "I've brought your new resident," said Dr. Janeway. At that point, my legs turned to rubber, and I headed to the nearest chair. "Freddie, we work hard here," commanded Dr. Natus. "Let's go." And so began my journey at the Children's Hospital 50 years ago. Introduction. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Let me also thank David McIlvaney for his leadership and stewardship of this lecture series. Steve Harris for his masterful audiovisual expertise. John Perry for the use of this, his podium. And Haley Noble, my administrative associate and the creator of this slide production you will see. Student at the School of Public Health, and perhaps, who knows, one day the Commissioner of Public Health of Vermont. I will divide this talk into 4 parts. The Children's Hospital, the training and career of an academic physician, the influence of Anasquam and the impact of mentors, and finally, a reflection on our better angels. I will offer much through stories, many of them personal. People remember stories, they forget facts. Finally, you will be gratified to know that this talk only lasts 40 minutes. I hope to keep you awake. To put us on the same page, there are ultimately two types of physicians: private practice physicians whose almost total focus is on patient care, and academic physicians whose focus is divided between care, teaching, and research. 85% of physicians in the United States will enter private practice. 15% will enter academic medicine. Academic physicians work and serve two masters: the hospital and their medical school, and are salaried by their institution. Upward progression from instructor to assistant professor to associate professor to full professor is the coin of the realm in academic medicine. The focus of this talk will be on the latter. The Children's Hospital. The Children's Hospital is an iconic pediatric institution. It is the largest in the United States and arguably one of the most prestigious. It was founded in 1869 with 27 beds in a townhouse in Boston's South End to care for the poor and the sick of Boston. In 1882, it moved to Huntington Avenue, next to Symphony Hall, and across from the Red Stockings ballpark, the predecessor of the Boston Red Sox. Its final move would be to Longwood Avenue in 1914, next to the Harvard Medical School. Its campus included the Honeywell building, with cows for tuberculosis-free milk across the street, and 5 pavilion buildings for surgical and medical patients. Today, it is a campus of over 440 inpatient beds, 13 floors of outpatient clinics, 3 freestanding research buildings, all devoted to its 3 central missions: care, research, and teaching. In this photo, the Children's Hospital is seen in the center. Several Harvard Medical School buildings on the left. The Brigham and Women's Hospital on the top, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Center on the right. It is also spread out into hospitals and clinics in the suburbs and into a number of neighborhood health centers. Care was carried out in the late 1880s on large wards in the Huntington Avenue site. By the mid-1990s, in cubicles to limit infection, and today in individual patient rooms with parents able to sleep over. General medical and surgical wards exist, as well as specialty units. For example, neurology, orthopedics, and cardiology. Isolation rooms for high-tech care are also used for severely ill patients undergoing chemotherapy, immunotherapy, organ transplantation, and gene therapy. The faculty, initially small in number and part-time, with the majority of their time spent in private practice, has grown now to a full-time faculty of over 1,000 in the Department of Pediatrics in the hospital, the department in which I work. And as a whole, close to 2,000 physicians and surgeons, and over 13,000 total employees. The medical staff, house staff, numbered 5 to 6, all males, in 1900. 75 in 1969 when George Pater, George is on my right, and I were senior residents. Now, with more women. And today, to 150 residents, with 60% being female, and the number of Afro-American and Hispanics being trained increasing in number. Research remains central to the mission, with the elucidation of blood electrolytes, allowing for life-saving intravenous fluid and electrolyte therapy discovered by Dr. James Gamble, seen in this picture, in the 1930s. The first chemotherapy drug for childhood leukemia by Dr. Sidney Farber in the 1940s. And the growth of the polio virus in tissue culture, leading to the polio vaccine to prevent clinical poliomyelitis, and the Nobel Prize for Dr. John Enders in the 1950s. And today, so many important discoveries that have changed the face of pediatric care. Finally, so many accomplishments and firsts achieved by physicians and surgeons at Children's Hospital over the years can also be attributed to their being faculty at the Harvard Medical School. Academic promotion is the engine for new discoveries and excellence in care, teaching, and research, and is a very important contributor to the hospital's success. My training as a physician and an academic career. I offer my training to become a physician and my ultimate career as an example, as very similar to all academic physicians. Both were arduous and demanding, but also greatly fulfilling. Both were filled with very sad moments, as well as humorous and unforgettable events. As a teenager, my career started as an orderly at Emerson Hospital in Concord, at the behest of my mother. And later, as a volunteer in the summer, learning to read x-rays at the Addison Gilbert Hospital. It also involves sitting in the Janeway living room in Annisquam, listening to Dr. Janeway recount the wonders of the Children's Hospital. As Petey has told you, in fact, my family first came to this village in 1937 at the invitation of close Concord and Annisquam friends, the Alden Frenches, the Windsor Gales, the Brooke Stevens, and the John Teals. My career then progressed to Yale College as a pre-med, but with many courses taken in summer school at the University of Michigan, Harvard, and Tufts, because varsity soccer and varsity squash practices in the afternoons precluded my attending the required afternoon laboratory sessions. Then it was on to the University of Virginia Medical School. Long hours of study and sleep deprivation. In contrast to today, medical school involved a weeding out process. 15% of our class did not make it to graduation. As vice president of my class, I had the privilege of a room on the idyllic setting of the lawn. Idyllic save for no bathrooms. In the cold of winter, some did not make it to their final destination. The Southerners saying it was the Northerners, and the Northerners saying it was the Southerners, and almost a second Civil War. Then it was on to Bellevue Hospital. City hospitals such as Boston City Hospital and Bellevue Hospital in New York City were felt by many pursuing academic careers as the place to train, offering a wide variety of diseases and considerable autonomy. It included over 120-hour work weeks, every other night and every other weekend duty, and a 2-week vacation. But for the first time, the feelings of being a real physician and making a difference. I offer 2 memorable personal moments. A first reflection. At 2 a.m. on the overnight shift in the emergency room, on a bitterly cold, wintry night, where the dispossessed found shelter from the warmth. An unshaven, Bowery drunkard with the Brooks Brothers coat said to me, "Don't sell me short, Doc. I went to Harvard." Realities of life. And a second, being told by my chief that the faculty decided I must leave Bellevue, that I needed more pediatric subspecialty training than Bellevue could offer. I protested. I love Bellevue. Aren't I doing a good job? But to no avail. As a comment on the strong mentoring culture of those times, Dr. Krugman said that he had talked to Johns Hopkins and the Children's Hospital in Boston. I interviewed at both and came to Boston. Then a year of residency at Children's, 2 years as a Navy lieutenant and a pediatrician in Morocco, caring for Navy-dependent families and Marines returning to the U.S. during the Vietnam War, and then back to Children's Hospital, followed by 4 years of chief residency, arguably the most happy professional years of my life. I have likened chief residency to being a clerk for a Supreme Court justice. It is the entry into an academic career with exposures that only the chief resident is able to experience. It is a period of remarkably hard work, but incredible personal and professional growth. The chief resident reports directly to the physician-in-chief, in my case, Dr. Janeway, and is responsible for the residents. The residents in the early 1970s were of the hippie generation and rebellious. Hair was long, and thus the often heard complaint, "I wish they would appreciate what's inside my head, not what's on top of it." Jill and I were married in the 3rd year of my chief residency. One night, when arriving home particularly late, she said, "I plan to talk to your boss." I said, "Oh, don't do that, I'll get fired." She replied, "You are not as smart as I thought you were." She and Dr. Janeway ultimately reached a negotiated compromise. 1 more year of chief residency. One final story. In my 4th year, I was considering an academic career in infectious diseases or toxicology. I went to Dr. Janeway for advice, and he offered me at length the pluses and minuses of each. Which should I do? I asked. I won't answer that, he gently said. You have to live with that decision, not me. I carefully followed that advice assiduously for years as I advised young physicians. Medicine has its fulfilling and joyous moments, but it also has its very tragic and heart-wrenching moments. When I was a chief resident and junior faculty member, I, with extensive senior faculty involvement, was put in charge of patients afflicted with a newly discovered disease of liver failure and fulminant brain edema, Rye syndrome, precipitated by chickenpox and flu and coupled with aspirin. Children lived or died in a 3 to 5 day period of time, despite our most aggressive efforts. Of 30 cases over a 3-month period of time, we lost 50% of the children. I had to tell their families that they had lost their child, that we had failed them. Gratefully, our research led to all aspirin bottles having placed on their labels, "Do not give aspirin to children with the flu or chickenpox," with a subsequent fall in the incidence of the disease. We also developed the staging system for the disease that ultimately would be used throughout the country. As a junior faculty member, I pursued the specialty of toxicology and poison center work. My laboratory was the Poison Center, located at the Children's Hospital, with over 300 calls a day from throughout Massachusetts. Many accidental, but many serious and purposeful, involving drugs of abuse and attempts at suicide. Many severely ill patients were managed jointly with acute care hospitals throughout the state. The Massachusetts Poison Control System, which I was privileged to start with the then Governor Mike Dukakis, was the perfect setting for doing clinical research and treating and creating new knowledge. The center achieved national recognition. During this 10-year period of time, I also ran the courses for 3rd and 4th year Harvard medical students, rotating for their pediatric training through the Children's Hospital. This responsibility involved lots of teaching on the wards and in the clinics. My boss during this time was Dr. Mary Ellen Avery, the first woman chief of a clinical department at the Harvard Medical School, and the discoverer of hyaline membrane disease in newborns. A pioneer in American medicine, she was tough. One Saturday morning, hard at work on a paper, I rose to greet her. "Good morning, Dr. Avery." She looked at my paper, then at me, and firmly responded, "Don't talk, write." And she often pronounced in academic medicine, it's not a matter of how smart you are. It's a matter of how much glue there is between the seat of your pants and the seat of the chair. Then it was on to Associate Chief of Pediatrics for the department and the hospital. I have worked closely with 4 physicians-in-chief and have served as the hospital's interim physician-in-chief on 2 occasions. I simultaneously ran the residency program at Children's Hospital. This responsibility involved much academic writing and lecturing on medical education. The residency program attracted the best and the brightest throughout the country, accepting only 4% of applicants and placing 85% of its graduates in academic medicine throughout the country. Starting at 70 residents when I took over its directorship, it now numbers 150 residents in training each year. It is the only pediatric residency program in the United States involving 2 academic hospitals, Boston Medical Center and Boston Children's Hospital, and 2 medical schools, the Harvard Medical School and Boston University School of Medicine. Over the 27 years of my leadership of this program, I had the privilege of training over 1,000 academic physicians. From 1985 to 1995, I worked most closely with David Nathan, department chair, a great friend, and ultimately the president of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Dr. Nathan was an incredible academic physician, mentor, and magical leader. His words to this day still ring loudly. Do the difficult today, the impossible tomorrow. There are assassins everywhere. Check everything yourself. Worry constantly about your patients when you go to bed at night and when you wake up in the morning. And to every incoming class, it's not a residence hospital. It's not even my hospital. It's the Children's Hospital. And on a humorous note, on one of the occasions when I was serving as interim physician-in-chief for the hospital, I showed First Lady Hillary Clinton around the Children's Hospital with the then junior Massachusetts Senator, Ted Kennedy. When Mrs. Clinton got down on the floor to play with a child with leukemia, an overweight Ted Kennedy also got down on the floor. His horrified new wife, Reggie, said to me, "He never will be able to get up." Several hefty workmen saved the day and effortlessly lifted the Massachusetts senator to a vertical position. My last 12 years have been focused more at the Harvard Medical School, shepherding and defending academic promotion of pediatric faculty from the MGH and the Children's Hospital. It's a wonderful job, witnessing close at hand the young talent of today. My involvement with Harvard Medical School has been frequent over the years and has included running medical student education at Children's, establishing a promotion ladder for clinicians in the hospital, and chairing many search committees. I was fortunate to become a full professor in 1986, the William Berenberg Professor of Pediatrics in 1990, and the Berenberg Distinguished Professor in 2007. The Harvard Medical School has always meant much to me. After many hours committed to research and teaching in toxicology, general pediatrics, and medical education, I have recently enjoyed the writing of 4 books. The first with my colleague and mentor, Bob Haggerty, on my great chief, Dr. Janeway. The second, a pictorial history of the Children's Hospital. The third, a 10-year effort on the residency at Children's Hospital from 1882 to today. and the fourth, soon to be published, focused on a select number of prestigious medical school professors since 1871. Anascom and mentors. My career has simulated that of most academic physicians, a professional life combining clinical care, research and teaching, and administrative duties. It has been greatly influenced and inspired by great professional mentors. In recent months, I have become increasingly aware of the impact of Anascom and the great influence of my mentors in this village. They framed me as a person and set my compass. I remember walking home one night at age 17 on the last stretch of Adams Hill Road. On my right, home of Sergeant Kennedy, Secretary of Harvard University. Then Professor Langer, renowned Harvard Professor of History. And then Dr. John Egan, quintessential Addison Gilbert physician. And on my left, Sam Haynes, endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic. And finally, the Janeway Marr House, with two renowned physicians, Charles Janeway and Bill Meyer. It was 1 a.m. and Professor Langer's light and Dr. Janeway's light were still on. Noting that observation to my parents, over breakfast the next morning, my parents quietly said to me, "That is what you must do if you wish to make a difference." And several years later, with trepidation, because careers in business had been the professional calling of my family for generations, I told them I wished to pursue a career in medicine. They wisely responded, "We care less what you do. We care greatly that you do it well." And in my early 30s, as an exhausted chief resident, over Sunday lunch, with a bit of slightly exaggerated humor, as I fell asleep over my soup, my father began, "When will the boy get a real job?" And my sister, "Why can't he do his own laundry?" And my brother, "And buy some new shoes without holes. It's embarrassing." And then my mother to the rescue, "Poor boy, he works so hard." And like Lazarus, I lifted my face from the soup and said, "Mom, I always knew you had the best judgment in this family." Memories of the culture of Anascom and their influence on me run deep. The beginnings of the junior and senior program with young counselors, Lynette Pater, Holly French, Anne Janeway, Ellen Egan, Judy Parks, and George Pater. Sunday lunch for the elders on the AYC porch as the birds, lightnings, fishes, and turnabouts started off with the gun on a run with a southwest breeze into the bay. My first luncheon at the Harvard Club at age 16 as the fledgling first Commodore of the Anascom Junior Yacht Club, as Commodores John Bishop and Ben Smith instructed me about bylaws. Or prize night on Monday evenings of Labor Day, and the glittering silver displayed for all to see and us to hope for. Eastern Point Day, the Saturday after Labor Day, and the waning days of a glorious summer. And finally, the tennis tournaments on Labor Day, on the AYC and the old Wharf Lot courts. The years of learning to compete, to win with humility, and to lose with grace. Lessons for life. And monumental influences for me, Janie Stevens, teaching me how to sail. Dick Meacham, how to play tennis. Or Ben Smith, as I spent hours in the bay looking at the sterns of this teaser, the bat, seen in this photo, and the mouette, never to see their bows. And the words of Ben Smith, an icon to me, after a sailing competition in Boston. You are the only Republican I know who has made it in and out of the South Boston Yacht Club alive. And that magical day on the Joseph P. Kennedy in Newport in 1962 at the America's Cup, as the president asked Ben if the American boat had made the correct tack. An ambassador to the United Nations, Governor Adlai Stevenson, explored with me for a half hour as we made our way back into Newport Harbor, the training of a young physician. In this photo, one can see Ben Smith at the head of the table, the president in front of him, the first lady in front of the president, Adlai Stevenson to her left, talking to Jackie's mother, Mrs. Auchincloss, and finally a squinting Fred Lovejoy on the adjoining deck. The influences of the magical summers of yesterday and yesterday are monumental. I hope we will never forget that fact and the impact on our youth. My mentors in Annisquam, Janie Stevens, Dick Meacham, Ben Smith, and the Children's Hospital, Dr. Janeway, Dr. Avery, and Dr. Nathan, and of course my parents, left a lasting imprint on me. I will always be in their debt. But if you would permit me, I offer two very different but important mentors. My wife, Jill, has been through it all. Good and bad, a rock of support and firm support and encouragement. Calm equanimity in the face of the storm, always with sound advice. You must take time to smell the flowers. That task can wait until tomorrow. Never leave without a kiss. And we will always, always do it together. Thank you, hon. And to Phoebe, Peter, and Ted, thank you for being here. It means a lot to Mom and me. And finally, a second mentor. That wonderful, simple prayer learned by every St. Paul student. Grant that in all the joys of life, we may never forget to be kind. Help us to be unselfish in friendship, thoughtful of those less happy than ourselves, and eager to bear the burdens of others. A simple but powerful compass for life. Our better angels, in conclusion. In ending, Abraham Lincoln, in his first inaugural address in 1861, to a country deeply strained by divisions and discord, implored his countrymen to call upon and be guided by the better angels of their nature. I believe that this tapestry of halcyon, Annisquam experiences and revered mentors that I have shared with you tonight awaken my better angels. Through the ages, I believe they have also woken the better angels of many Anasquam physicians. Sam Haynes, Warren Babson, John Egan, Hamer Lacey, Robert Lundberg, Jean Mayer, Edward Newhouser, Charles Janeway, Bill Meyer, George Pater, David Simmons, John Hughes, Carly Janeway, David Teal, Rita Teal, Rob Russell, Katie Janeway, Sarah Teal, Catherine Hollett, Lindsay Peirce, and others now and in the future. They have inspired by their great example and commitment to the human endeavor. We are also blessed to live in a remarkable community of remarkable individuals with remarkable talents who, through their example, have inspired, inculcated, and imprinted, and brought out our better angels. As examples among many, let me mention a few over the years. Education leaders, Hollis and M.N. French, Carolyn Pater, Steve Wilkins. Professors, William Langer, Mike Wheeler, John Perry. Industrialists, Quincy Bent and Brooke Stevens. Playwriters, Russell Krauss. Teachers, Dick Meacham and Margaret Allard. Artists, Peter Herbert and Sean McNeff. Intelligence officers, Dick Lehman and Andy and Ken Canoss. Writers and poets, Jill Carter and Anthony Robbins. Play directors, Terry Sands and Mary Curtis. Nurses, Sarah Hackett and Eileen Sporing. Judges, Herb Wilkins and Nat Gorton. Great athletes, so many to list, but I will mention a few. Judd Gale, oarsman. Julie and Ben Punky Smith, and Jack Parker, hockey coaches. Duncan Nelson, Dudley Blodgett, and Nigel Bentley, tennis players. And of course, John Egan, an ageless tennis player. And Ben Smith, George Pater, and Elizabeth Bent, great skippers, and the list goes on and on. We are so fortunate that they are or have been among us. Finally, every day we look around us, we see individuals who practice daily the work of their better angels. They lead, inspire, and magnificently give back to our community through the Sewing Circle, the Leonard Club, the Village Hall Association, the library, the Anasquam Historical Association, the Anasquam Village Church, the AYC, the AVP, the Good Neighbors, the Exchange, the Seafair, and the Waxworks. They have our abiding gratitude. And so I believe that all of these magnificent Anasquam residents, and many others not mentioned, have shown through their good works and generous example the better angels of their nature. They are the soul of the village, and they deserve to be celebrated and thanked. And so for me, from Baby Beach, from the old Wharf Lot tennis courts, from the Annisquam Yacht Club, and from the Plum Cove Can and the Outer Mark, from the vineyards of healing of the Children's Hospital and the halls of Academe, and back to this remarkable village and its remarkable citizens. It has indeed been a glorious journey. Thank you.